Welcome, wanderers, to a new episode of Echoes from the Loam. This episode tells the sorrowful tale of a bride and her untimely demise. Remember these rules. Do not plant thistle in spring. Do not wear white on the moor. And do not speak her name after dusk. So settle in, draw your curtains, and stay silent. The cottage stood at the edge of the moor, its stone walls mottled with lichen and thyme. Ivy clung to the chimney like a strangled veil, and the windows, clouded with dust, reflected nothing but sky. It was the kind of place that looked far older than its records, as if it had been built not by hands, but by memories. The wind never seemed to stop. It moved through the tall grass in waves, combed the brambles with invisible fingers, and whispered through the cracks in the slate roof. Locals said it carried a name, but no one dared speak it aloud. The garden was a tangle of neglect. Brambles twisted around rusted tools, moss bloomed in the bird bath like a slow infection, and thistles, hundreds and hundreds of them, stood tall and defiant, their violet heads bobbing in the breeze like mourners at a wake. One patch near the gates was especially dense, and the soil beneath it was darker, richer, and a single white ribbon lay tangled among the roots. The air shifted. It wasn't colder, it was heavier, and the scent of peat gave way to something sweeter. Wilting roses, perhaps, or old perfume, faint but familiar. A crow called from the chimney, and another answered from the trees. Inside, the cottage was quiet. Dust hung in the air like suspended breath. The floorboards creaked beneath each step, and on the mantel, a porcelain bride stood cloaked in grime. Her veil was cracked and her bouquet missing. In the cottage's smallest drawer, beneath a rusted key and a bundle of dried lavender, Lena found a folded page. The paper was yellowed with age and torn at the edges, and clearly written by a hand that trembled. It read, "Do not plant thistle in spring. Do not wear white on the moor. Do not speak her name after dusk." Further down it read she was promised. Her veil torn by wind, her bouquet swallowed by soil, the groom lied. Each bloom marks a memory. Each thorn draws blood. And when the thistles rise, she walks. There was no signature, no date, just a smear of ink at the bottom, as if the writer had stopped suddenly, or been stopped. Lena turned the page over, and on the back a single word was scrawled in pencil. Marion. Outside, the wind rose again, and somewhere beneath the thistles, the soil seemed to breathe. That night, wrapped snugly in an old hand-sewn patchwork quilt, Lena dreamed of the moor. It was wrong somehow. The sky hung low, heavy, with a colour that had no name. It was somewhere between ashen grey and bruised flesh. The thistles were everywhere, taller than trees, their stalks blackened and their blooms pulsing faintly like lanterns. She walked a narrow path carved between them, and the soil squelched underfoot, damp and warm. The thistles leaned towards her as she passed. Their thorns grazed her coat, whispering against the fabric. And then she saw her, a woman in white, standing motionless at the edge of the field. Her veil hung like gauze, soaked in something dark. Her face was obscured, but Lena knew somehow, without seeing, that her eyes were open, wide and watching. The woman raised her hand, not to beckon or to summon or to greet, to accuse. Lena turned, and the thistles behind her had twisted into shapes, rings, ribbons, nooses, symbols of binding and betrayal. And beneath one bloom something gleamed, a wedding band half swallowed. She reached for it, and the woman screamed. But it wasn't sound, it was a pressure, a crushing grief that filled Lena's lungs with cold. She woke gasping, her hands trembling, her nails were packed with soil, and her breath smelled faintly of lavender and roses. Then she heard the whispers. She walks. She remembers. She waits. Lena didn't sleep the next night. She tried, but the cottage had changed. The walls creaked in patterns, rhythmic and breath-like. The shadows moved far too slowly, and the thistles outside her window were closer. She stayed in the sitting room, wrapped in a blanket, watching the fire roar before it eventually died around 3 a.m. The clock had stopped ticking. It wasn't broken, it just paused. And then she saw it, a veil, draped over the armchair opposite her. It hadn't been there before. It was damp and it smelled faintly of that same lavender and roses. She blinked her eyes hard and it was gone. She stood, heart thudding. Her reflection in the window stared back, and behind her reflection in the glass, a figure stood, white, veiled, motionless. She turned, but there was nothing there. She backed away, her breath fogging the glass. Later, she found thistle petals scattered across the floor. They hadn't been there before. They were fresh. She picked one up, and it bled. And the sound of whispering voices. You wore white. Lena, desperate for answers, searches and searches before she finds an old book in an even older chest, nestled in one of the spare rooms. Hidden amongst its marred pages, she finds some kind of ritual. It's meant to reveal Marion's truth, but what it unveils is far more disturbing. The ritual was written in a book with no title, bound in cracked leather, pages brittle and stained. The instructions were vague, but the intent was clear. To see her, to know her, to bind her. It required 3 things: a thistle bloom freshly cut at dusk, a bone buried in soil no less than a year, and a mirror untouched by moonlight. She spent the day gathering them. She shouldn't have. At midnight, Lena lit a single candle. No lights, no fire, only wax, flame and shadow. She placed the thistle in a bowl of water the bone beside it, and the mirror faced her. Bride of bloom, bride of thorn, bound in veil, betrayed and sworn, come through glass, come through grief, show me truth, or show me peace. The mirror darkened, not with shadow but with depth, and became a tumultuous pool, and something moved beneath. Lena leaned in closer, and the water in the bowl began to boil. The bone cracked and splintered, and the thistle bled. And then Marion appeared. Her veil was stitched to her skin, her eyes hollow but filled with soil. Her mouth opened but did not move. Lena couldn't look away. The mirror pulled at her. The breath fogged the glass. Her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. Marion raised her hand, and in it a bouquet of thistles, each bloom bearing an eye, and they blinked in unison. And then she spoke. You called me. You wore white. You will walk. The candle died, the mirror shattered, and Lena screamed, but no one heard. No one except the thistles. The morning after the ritual, Lena didn't speak. She couldn't. Her voice had felt borrowed, used. She wandered the moor, drawn there by something she couldn't name. The thistles parted for her as if to clear a path for her thoughts. At the heart of the field she found it. A stone with a carving, a veil torn in two. She knelt, and the soil, which appeared to have been freshly dug, was soft. She dug it with her hands, and 6 inches down she found a box. Wooden, rotting, bound in rusted wire. And inside, a wedding veil stained and torn, a dried bouquet of thistles, and a letter, folded and sealed with wax. She opened it and read it aloud. To whom it may concern, though none ever do. My name was Marion Elsbeth Thorne. I was promised to a man who loved another. He wed me for land, for legacy, for lies. On the eve of our wedding, he left me on the moor. He said he'd return and bring the priest. He brought no one. I waited, I walked, I wore white. The thistles bloomed that night. They fed on grief, fed on me. Now I bloom. Now I walk. Lena dropped the letter and the wind snatched it, scattering the words like ash. She looked up and the thistles around her had grown taller. And at the edge of the moor, the veil fluttered, not with wind but with breath. She waits. Lena walked into the village the next morning. She needed some kind of answer or absolution. The locals watched her pass them by with narrowed eyes. They whispered, but not about her, about the veil. And at the edge of the village, she met him. An old man, hunched, wrapped in a wool coat too thin for the seasons, his weathered face sporting something close to a 5 o'clock shadow. He sat on a bench beneath a dying yew tree, carving something into the wood with a rusted nail. He didn't look up. You've seen her, haven't you? Lena froze. She walks when the thistles bloom. She speaks when the veil is worn. She binds you when the soil is warm. He stopped carving. The bench now bore a single word. Bride. You're not the first, but you could be the last. He handed her something, a scrap of cloth, white, frayed and marked with a symbol, a circle of thistles, pierced by a single thorn. She took my wife. I tried everything and failed. That's the seal I discovered in an old history book. It binds her, but it must be buried in silence. Lena asked him what he meant by that. He looked at her, eyes pale and wet from memories. You must bury it where no sound lives, no wind, no breath. He stood slowly. There's a place at Hollow's End. He walked away. Lena looked down at the cloth. It was warm and smelled faintly of lavender and roses. She turned toward the moor. The thistles were waiting, calling. Lena reached Hollow's End by dusk. It was silent. Too silent, even the wind refused to speak. She carried the seal wrapped in black cloth. The symbol, the circle of thistles, pierced by a thorn, seemed to pulse faintly as if it was remembering. She found the place, a hollow in the earth ringed by dead trees. No birds, no insects, no breath, no life. She dug. Not deep, just enough. Then she placed the seal inside, whispering the old man's words. No wind, no breath, no memory. She covered it over and pressed the soil down with her bare hands and waited. The air grew colder. The trees bent inwards towards her and the ground began to bleed. Thin rivulets of black seeped from the hollow, curling like veins across the moor. Lena stepped back quickly, and then she saw her. Marion stood at the edge of the hollow. Her veil was gone and her eyes were open. You buried the seal, but not the vow. Lena tried to run. She couldn't. Her feet were rooted as if the soil held her. And Marion stepped forward. You wore the veil. You spoke the name. You are the vow. The moor swallowed the sound, and Hollow's End remembered nothing. The cottage stood silent. Its windows fogged, its hearth cold. No one had lived there for 15 years. No one dared. Until now. A stranger arrived, drawn by whispers on the moor. She found the journal beneath the floorboards, wrapped in linen stiff with soil. The pages were brittle and the ink faded, but the words remained. She walks when the thistles bloom. She binds when the soil is warm. You are the vow. Sketches filled the margins, a hollow ringed by dead trees, a veil drifting in windless air, a face half formed. The final page was written in something darker than ink. I buried the seal, but she buried me. And if you're reading this, She's already listening. Outside, the thistles have begun to bloom. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.